Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by
SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life.
Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Zase není vidět, víš,
To lose patience is to lose the battle, said Mahatma Gandhi. We need these words now more than ever. 10 months and counting, the virus from Wuhan is not slowing down. The world's patience is wearing thin. There's no treatment yet, no vaccine. What's coming is another wave, a second surge of cases in the US, in Europe, in Russia, and the elusive flattening of the curve in India. A second round of lockdowns is being imposed in many countries and people are out partying. One last time, they say. Well, it may truly be the last. No social distancing, no masks, massive crowds, an open invite to the virus that has already taken more than 1 million lives. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss why people do this despite knowing the risks. And will winter make the virus worse? Nobody wants this news, but we cannot wish it away. Will this pandemic become bigger as temperatures drop? We'll bring you a report. Also on the show, in Pakistan, the opposition has declared that COVID-18 is more dangerous than COVID-19. We'll explain. Will Instagram expose its hidden ads and paid influencers? A legal nudge might force it to. Thailand protests against its Playboy king, the world's richest, who has returned after months in Germany with his harem. And will Japan dump more than 1 million tons of radioactive water into the sea? We bring you a special report, but first, as always, Gravitas Global Headlines.
A day after issuing notices for restricting airspace and waters off its Black Sea coast, Turkey has reportedly test-fired its Russian defense missile system S-400 in the region. The move is likely to aggravate tensions with the US, which sharply opposes Turkey's defense purchase from Moscow on the grounds the S-400s compromise NATO defense systems. Belarus puts Svetlana Tikhanovskaya on wanted list for making calls to overthrow constitutional order. Tikhanovskaya had fled to neighboring Lithuania shortly after a disputed 9th of August election and has since met European political leaders and called for President Alexander Lukashenko to leave power. Kyrgyzstan has ended its state of emergency as Prime Minister Sadir Zaparov has consolidated his power by formally assuming the interim presidency. Zaparov has set January 10 as the deadline for parliamentary elections. A shocking report by Afghanistan's Independent Human Rights Commission reveals that women in Afghanistan are being forced to undergo virginity tests. According to the report, the tests are still being conducted without the consent of the patient or a court order, as required by a 2018 law. People in New Zealand are all set to head to the polls for a general election this Saturday after 3 years of the Labour Party's Jacinda Ardern. There are 17 parties contesting the election, including the National Party led by Judith Collins and Ardern's coalition partners NZ First, led by Winston Peters. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has criticized Turkey's involvement in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, reiterating his call for the issue to be resolved through diplomacy. This as the Defense Ministry of the region has recorded another 29 casualties among its military, pushing the military death toll to 633 since fighting with the Azeri forces erupted on the 27th of September. Japan's new Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga will aim to beef up security ties when he visits Vietnam and Indonesia next week, amid concerns about Beijing's growing assertiveness. However, he is likely to steer clear of the harsh anti-China rhetoric used by US counterparts. Dozens of uncontained wildfires continue to burn on US West Coast, with 21 of them burning in California alone. In Colorado, evacuation orders have been issued as authorities expect the blaze to become the state's biggest wildfire on record. Dinesh Karthik has stepped down as captain of the Kolkata Knight Riders and handed over the responsibility to Eoin Morgan. Karthik hasn't made big runs in this year's IPL, and he says he wants to focus on his batting. England's World Cup winning captain Morgan will take over for the remainder of the tournament. The team management say it will be a straight swap, with Karthik taking Morgan's vice-captaincy role. Seven-time MotoGP champion Valentino Rossi has tested positive for COVID-19. The 41-year-old is now expected to miss the next 2 races of the season in Hungary. Rossi travelled to his home in Italy after last weekend's French Grand Prix and developed a slight fever. He subsequently underwent a quick PCR test, which was negative, but a second one returned a positive. Rossi becomes the first MotoGP rider to get the dreaded virus. He has failed to finish each of the last 3 races and is currently 13th in the bikers' standings.
Hospital intensive care units are filling up again. The lockdowns are back. New infections are breaking records. And if you thought the worst of this pandemic was truly behind us, you need to look at some numbers. Right now, the world has 4 active hotspots. The United States, it is reporting a massive surge from 30 to 35,000 new cases in early September. America is now averaging 50,000 daily new cases. 50,000. In 1 week, the United States reported more than 350,000 cases. Those numbers were recorded from the 8th to the 14th of October. India has the world's second highest number of cases. While there has been a drop in the number of daily infections, we are far from containing the virus. In Europe, dozens of cities have been forced to go into a lockdown again. Why? Because the continent is reporting more daily infections than the 3 worst-hit countries together: the United States, India and Brazil. Over the past week, Europe has recorded more than 100,000 new infections every day. In Russia, too, the Wuhan virus is far from contained. More than 15,000 infections were recorded in the past 24 hours alone. It's a new record for Russia. And if you haven't figured it out by now, this is what a second wave looks like. You may have learned to live with the virus, but that has not slowed it down. As the restrictions were lifted worldwide, more people were infected and the cases began to rise. Look at what's happening in Europe. The entire continent suppressed the first wave of infections. They reopened cities. Now European governments are battling the worst outbreak since April. France is among the worst hit. It has declared a state of health emergency. The United Kingdom is imposing restrictions in hard-hit regions, in cities like Liverpool, where people were just not ready to accept the latest round of curbs, so they took to the streets. They partied right before the restrictions kicked in. This was a couple of days back. Take a look. In fact, similar scenes played out in Glasgow and The Hague in the Netherlands too. These pictures left the authorities and health experts horrified. They face a real struggle in containing the pandemic. The World Health Organization has issued a warning for Europe. If the restrictions are relaxed, they say, daily mortality rates could go up by 4 to 5 times. Experts say the changing weather is contributing to this surge.
Fall-winter surge continues to unfold in Europe with exponential increases in daily cases and matching percentage increases in daily deaths. The evolving epidemiological situation in Europe raises great concern. Daily numbers of cases are up, hospital admissions are up, and COVID is now the 5th leading cause of deaths, and the bar of 8,000 deaths per day has now been reached.
The worry is not limited to Europe. The Wuhan virus is surging again, and authorities around the world are running out of options. More and more countries are imposing another round of lockdowns and tougher restrictions. That's because we do not have a vaccine or an effective treatment yet. 10 months have passed. Scientists have been working overtime to find a silver bullet, but we don't have it yet. The second major threat is that of reinfections, meaning those who've recovered from the virus may be infected again. Such cases are rare right now, but they're there. Scientists have found that immunity to this virus fades. Donald Trump should take note of this. He's going around calling himself immune and threatening to kiss people. A case from Nevada is worth mentioning here. A 25-year-old man was infected twice, and in both instances, he showed symptoms. India too has 3 suspected cases of reinfection. Indian authorities have now decided to consider 100 days as the cutoff period for reinfection. So this is where things stand. No vaccine, no treatment, a threat of reinfection, and a difficult winter ahead. Let me make it worse. There is a good chance that the Wuhan virus may never really go away, just like the flu or cold, but much deadlier. So we'll have to find a way to live with it, but that doesn't mean that the pandemic will never end. History offers some hope. Pandemics of the past ended when enough people developed immunity to a disease, either through herd immunity or through a vaccine. For the Wuhan virus, we have a long way to go to achieve either. Our immediate focus should be on what lies ahead. Winter, the flu season, coupled with a virus that is not stopping down. By most estimates, winter will drive up the infections, and all of us who've been waiting for 2020 to end may find that the pandemic will not end with the calendar year. Here's a report.
Winter is always a busy time for doctors. The seasonal flu strikes, cough and cold spread. It's an annual test of human immunity. This year, the test will be much tougher.
You know, in winter, we go into close quarters, and that is, providing the virus with more people to infect at a closer range. So that risk is very much there, and it is very likely that we are going to experience, another surge until the vaccine is available, really, to try to counter it.
For perspective, look at what previous winters have brought. Last year in the United States, cases of the flu spiked by 40 times during winter. A century ago, during the Spanish flu pandemic, it was the same story. The year was 1918. The death rate shot up by 5 times during winter. Now we have a deadly virus on the prowl. It has killed more than 1 million people in the last 8 months. Will the winter supercharge the Wuhan virus? It is difficult to say. The outbreak began during winter in Wuhan. That was last year. The data is A, not trustworthy, and B, devoid of a pattern. What about previous pandemics? Have they worsened during winter? The world has witnessed 10 respiratory pandemics in the past 250 years. in only 3 cases did the winter contribute to a second wave of infections. Does that mean we have nothing to fear during winter? Experts are relying on basic logic to recommend caution. The first wave killed far too many people. The second one could be deadlier. It will coincide with the flu. Both have the same symptoms. Simultaneous outbreaks would strain healthcare systems. And there's no effective vaccine in sight yet. The most optimistic expectation is to have a vaccine by 2021. 45 vaccines are in clinical trials on humans. Even with the unprecedented speed of testing, mass vaccination programs are many months away. The chief scientist of the WHO says the young and healthy may have to wait for the vaccine until 2022, as the first supplies will be administered to the healthcare and frontline workers. As always, China remains the exception to the rule. It is cutting corners and administering vaccines under trial to thousands of citizens. Chinese companies are selling vaccines too. Reportedly, Sinovac is selling 1 dose of its CoronaVac vaccine for $30. CoronaVac is a vaccine candidate. It is yet to receive a global stamp of approval. But according to different reports, China has inoculated tens of thousands, if not more, under an emergency use program. All this while the world is still struggling to contain new clusters, reinfections, and a virus that is showing no signs of slowing down. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
We cannot talk about the second wave of the Wuhan virus or the impending winter horror without talking about what's happening around us right now. I'm referring to the growing crowds at the market. People flocking to movie theatres, restaurants and shopping malls. I'm talking about house parties and what happened in the Liverpool city centre 3 nights ago. These pub goers were partying one last time before new restrictions were imposed on the city. What would you call them? Wuhan virus deniers or people suffering from pandemic fatigue? Will you back the doctors who claim that these partygoers do not care about the people dying in the ICUs? Or will you consider that these people have had too much and for too long? Maybe they just want to enjoy themselves, relive their old lives one last time before heading back to the 4 walls of their homes. And I'm not promoting flouting of rules and regulations, neither am I endorsing violation of social distancing, but I do not want to vilify these people or those in India who are going to theatres and markets. We are, after all, in the 10th month of 2020. We have literally spent a whole year keeping ourselves away from other people and everything that defined our normal lives: school, office, gyms, coffee shops, traveling, meeting our friends and families, something as basic as taking the elevator or stepping out for weekly groceries. It's not easy. For how long can we do this? There is no end in sight. There's no vaccine. There's no relief. There's only a rising death toll and recurring restrictions. Social distancing can take a toll on us. We are social animals. We all want our old lives back. Most of us are too scared to even step out, and rightly so. Some of us end up giving in to our urges. We go shopping, but we don't want others to, because then there'll be too much crowd. We take the elevator once in a while, but we cringe the moment the lift arrives with another person in it. We want to eat out, but we judge other people who are back at the restaurant tables. I'm not endorsing their actions. I'm not condemning them either. I only have a message for them. The Wuhan virus is unsparing. And this is as true as the lockdown fatigue. We have come so far in keeping ourselves safe. Why not push ourselves a little more and stay at home and stay safe just for some more months, hopefully? Because you can party only when you're alive. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, COVID-18 has been declared more dangerous than COVID-19. No kidding here. Let me show you the headline and what it states. Rana Sanaullah, the president of Pakistan's main opposition party PMLN, has called the Imran Khan government, which came to power in 2018, COVID-18. He says that COVID-18 has damaged Pakistan more than the virus from Wuhan, and Mr. Sanaullah's party, along with several other opposition parties, is on a nationwide sanitation drive to wipe out COVID-18. I'm referring to the anti-government movement launched by the opposition in Pakistan. After days of uncertainty and speculation, the Pakistan Democratic Movement, a coalition of 11 political parties, held its first protest rally in the city of Gujranwala. Thousands of political workers and supporters from across the country attended this rally. Look at these images. It was perhaps one of the biggest shows of strength by the mostly fragmented Pakistani opposition in recent years. The star of the show was Maryam Nawaz Sharif, the daughter of Pakistan's former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, the vice president of his party PMLN. She was greeted by thousands as she stepped out of her car. And this was followed by a tumultuous welcome at the protest site. Look at these images. Her supporters welcomed her with a shower of rose petals. Remember, Maryam Nawaz is being seen by many as the heir to her father's political legacy. She has established herself as a leading opposition voice in the physical absence of Nawaz Sharif. She has been promising that the Imran Khan government would go home before January next year, and she reiterated the promise during the protest.
ये जो जाली हुकूमत है ना, इसका जो एंड है उसकी शुरुआत है. ये जो जाली हुकूमत है ना, इसका जो एंड है उसकी शुरुआत है.
It's the beginning of the end of this illegal government. The conviction is admirable, but will it yield any results? On Thursday, we told you how Imran Khan is going the extra mile to muzzle opposition voices. To prevent these protests from happening, his party cadre tried their best. PTI workers are being accused of placing large containers on routes leading to Gujranwala. The images are on your screen. The containers are said to have been placed in more than 31 locations. Reports say the police stopped truck and trolley drivers and forced them to park the containers in the middle of the road. And if you think this is ingenious, we'd say it keeps getting better. The Pakistani media says that Imran Khan has managed to arrange 10,000 euros to stage a counter-protest all the way in London. He has reportedly asked his advisor and PTI leader in the UK, a certain Sahibzada Jahangir, to hold demonstrations outside Nawaz Sharif's London residence. Imran Khan cannot afford to give a pay hike to health workers protesting in Islamabad for days now, but he has enough money to organize a protest in London, even wage a proxy war in Afghanistan. The Afghan media is carrying reports on how Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba terrorists are supporting a Taliban offensive. This is in Afghanistan's Helmand province. Pakistan's strategy of a proxy war is quite evident in the Taliban offensive. The governor of this province has revealed the presence of JEM and LET terrorists. They're training Taliban fighters in bomb making and military warfare. Let me remind you, the violence unleashed in Helmand has forced tens of thousands of Afghan civilians to leave their homes, and Pakistan, the so-called land of the pure, is playing a huge role in this exodus.
You have to have rule of law in Pakistan, a strong judicial system, depoliticized police, and stopping this war on terror, getting out of this war on terror, and immediately starting political dialogue, truth and reconciliation with the people of our tribal areas, and completely abandoning this military approach, which has failed.
Instagram is cracking down on paid posts, influencers, and hidden advertisement. Soon, celebrities and the so-called influencers of Instagram may not be able to post an ad without labeling it as one, which means every time they promote a product, they will have to tell you whether they were paid for this endorsement. Why should this be important to you? Our next report tells you how big the influencer culture has become.
Live from LA.
Hello, fam. How are you doing today? Just thought of sharing some news with you.
Hi, from New York, where it rains more often.
Those makeup tutorials you watch on Instagram, they are paid for. Those hotel room tours, those are paid for too. Shopping hauls aren't much of an exception. Restaurant recommendations are tampered with money. And every time an influencer is gushing over a mad sale on a site online or a store offline, well, the source of that excitement is a check or wired cash.
Everything to keep me fit.
Welcome to the world of hidden advertising on Instagram.
That my energy levels keep up with my physical and mental demands.
A world as true as Instagram filters and Insta influencers. A world where people with massive fan following are minting money. And the fans are being insta-fooled. They're being sold labels, overpriced hair products, good-for-nothing skin serums, can totally do without it luxury goods, overhyped restaurants, not proven by science diets in a very, very discreet manner. The business of Instagram marketing is big. It is worth nearly $2 billion. Profiting from it are brands and so-called influencers. Dwayne Johnson, for example, is making $1 million per sponsored post. Kylie Jenner charges $986,000. Cristiano Ronaldo is paid up to $889,000 per post. Kim Kardashian, Ariana Grande, Selena Gomez, Virat Kohli, Priyanka Chopra. They all post sponsored content, and these posts may not be labeled as ads, meaning you'll be sold a product and you'll not even know it. Instagram celebrities too are guilty of not labeling sponsored content. We have nothing against them or the mounting bank balance of celebrities. Nothing wrong in making money of your vanity metrics or turning your blog into a business. But there is something wrong in misusing your goodwill or fooling your fans. All we are asking for is transparency. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Bangkok is a city under siege. The Thai government has imposed a state of emergency. There's a ban on gatherings of more than 5 people, but for a second consecutive night, protesters defied the ban. They marched through the city, clashed with police officers, and proudly held up the 3-finger salute. We'll tell you what unfolded through the day today. But before that, a quick backgrounder. What do these protesters want? 3 things: the government's resignation, a new constitution, and reforms to the monarchy. Let's talk about the first demand. In 2014, Prayut Chan-o-cha led a military coup in Thailand. He promulgated a new constitution. He was appointed prime minister by a hand-picked parliament. 5 years later, he was re-elected. The opposition argued that the 2019 election was rigged, but the opposition's arguments did not matter, because Prayut Chan-o-cha had the side of the king. Which brings us to the other crucial demand: reforms to the monarchy. The Thai royal family wields considerable power. Late King Bhumibol was widely revered across the country. His son, not so much. The current king spends most of his time abroad with his harem. The pro-democracy protest was paused earlier this year on account of the pandemic, but the king's return from Germany seems to have reignited it. On Wednesday, as the royal motorcade was passing by, a group of protesters gathered around. They raised the 3-finger salute and shouted, "Our taxes." Seems like a peaceful form of dissent, but not in Thailand. 2 of those protesters have been arrested. Their charges: attempting violence against the Queen. If convicted, they could possibly get the death penalty. But the protesters are unfazed. Just listen to what one of them had to say before he surrendered to the police.
The only obstacles to the realization of tomorrow will be the doubts of today. Let us move forward with a strong and active faith. Don't worry about me. I will fight for the people of Thailand, for the people of the Multi Alliance. I will fight for you, even if I have to risk it all. So,
for those who are wondering, he was quoting Franklin Roosevelt. Let us move forward with a strong and active faith. That's exactly what is happening in Bangkok. An estimated 2,000 people were on the streets. Major intersections and the business district were occupied. They were chanting for the release of arrested pro-democracy activists. It did not take long for the riot police to arrive. A scuffle ensued. The police fired chemical-laced water from their cannons, but the people refused to leave. They remained on the streets well into the night. Such resolve in such large numbers. So what are the chances of success for these protesters? Two things stand in their way: an equally defined Prime Minister and a large conservative population. Prayut Chan-o-cha is trying to villainize the protesters. He has defended the ban on gatherings, and as for his resignation, he has no intention of putting in his papers.
It's dangerous because we don't know what is the true purpose of the people behind the scene. We have a clue about what they want, but they won't reveal their true identities. So please be careful. Don't fall in with the group deemed suspicious. What have I done wrong that I have to resign? What have I done wrong? I'm asking you.
While many argue that Thailand is slipping towards an absolute monarchy, there are people who seem comfortable with such a change. Staunch loyalists of the Thai royal family. We saw a glimpse of this at the late king's death anniversary. Thousands of people turned up to pay their respects. So Thailand is at a crossroads right now. How it navigates this period could probably determine the country's future for many, many years to come. Will Thailand sway closer to autocracy, or will the protesters prevail? We'll be keeping a close watch. In the meantime, let's tell you about this king of Thailand. He's the richest in the world, and now perhaps among the most reviled. He has a reputation of a playboy. He last made headlines when he went into isolation in a luxury hotel in Germany with his 20 mistresses.
The man on your screen is a monarch. The king of Thailand was caught dressed in jeans and a crop top, roaming around a German mall with his mistress a few years ago. Germans may not have recognized this man, but now his portraits have been placed all over Thailand. Little is known about Thailand's monarchs. The Thai laws restrict reporting on the royals, but King Rama X isn't a mystery. His reputation precedes him. The Thai king married his own bodyguard. He has flown his own plane and threw a 4-day funeral for his pet poodle. This piece from January called King Rama Thailand's Playboy King. He has 4 wives, 20 mistresses, and has been divorced thrice. So when King Rama ascended the throne, many did not take him seriously. But after taking the throne in 2016, he quickly amassed power. The king transformed nominal powers that the constitution gave him into real powers. The changes allowed him to exercise authority even when he's out of the country, which is most of the time. As the monarch, King Rama has control over $43 billion worth of royal assets. Beyond the money, the Thai king has muscle power too. After taking the throne, he arranged for units of the Thai army to report directly to him. In short, the king has a bad reputation, and controversies from within the kingdom only caused more damage to the monarchy. In 2019, the king stripped his royal consort of her titles, status and military ranks, accusing her of being disloyal. It happened within 3 months of her anointment. Allegedly, the royal consort wanted to be equal to the queen and was punished for her ambition. The royal consort was reinstated, but by then, protests against the Thai royalty had broken out. Now, those protests have turned into a movement. Thousands of people have taken to the streets in recent days, a mass defiance of the government and the king it represents. On Wednesday, the royal motorcade was slowed down by a crowd of protesters when the Queen was returning back to the palace from a function. The anger against the king and his exorbitant lifestyle has now become his worst nightmare. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let's talk about the United States. What was supposed to be the second presidential debate ended up being two separate presidential town halls. Donald Trump and Joe Biden held two simultaneous town hall events televised during prime time on rival networks. Voters and viewers had to flip back and forth between the two channels. Those who did not can just watch this report, the highlights from both the town halls. The NBC News Network put President Trump in the hot seat for a hard grilling session. The challenger, Joe Biden, appeared on the ABC News Network. Both men were asked tough questions. They were repeatedly pressed to clarify on their positions on contentious issues. Their COVID-19 status, the Supreme Court nomination, the mask mandate, white supremacy, future of foreign policy, Trump's tax scandal, allegations against Joe Biden of a planned ban on fracking. All of this was covered and more. Let's take this one at a time, starting with the health. Both men were questioned on when they last took a COVID-19 test. Joe Biden said he took one right before the town hall. Donald Trump almost evaded the question. He said he tests quite a bit.
By the way, before I came up here, I took another test. I've been taking it every day, the deep test, you know, the one that go in both. And because I wanted to be able, if I had not passed that test, I didn't want to come here and not, you know, expose anybody.
I guess confusion about this, and I think we can clear it up.
Yeah, and there shouldn't be.
Your first positive test was Thursday, October 1st, okay? When was your last negative test? When did you last remember having a negative test?
Well, I test quite a bit, and I can tell you that before the debate, which I thought it was a very good debate, and I felt fantastically. I had no problem before.
Then they talked about masks. How important was a mask in preventing COVID-19? Joe Biden said he always carries a mask, even though the president makes fun of him. Donald Trump said he was okay with masks. He then cited a report that apparently revealed that 85% of people who wear masks catch the virus. Which report is this? The U.S. president did not mention.
And something happened, but as far as the mask is concerned, I'm good with masks. I'm okay with masks. I tell people wear masks. But just the other day, they came out with a statement that 85% of the people that wear masks catch it.
Well,
so, you know, this is a very
I know
tricky,
that study.
That's what I heard, and that's what I saw.
And when a president doesn't wear a mask or makes fun of folks like me when I was wearing a mask for a long time, then, you know, people say, well, it mustn't be that important. But when a president says, I think this is very important, for example, I walked in here with this mask, but I have one of the N95 masks underneath it. I left it in my dressing room, the room I was in before I got here. And so I think it matters what we say.
Then we come to the issue of racism and white supremacy, another hot topic this election. Joe Biden was questioned on his controversial record on racism. Donald Trump was asked if he supported white supremacists. Joe Biden admitted to have supported a crime bill that targeted black Americans. Trump said he has denounced white supremacy for years.
I denounce white supremacy, okay?
You did
I've
2 days
denounced
later.
white supremacy for years, but you always do it. You always start off with a question. You didn't ask Joe Biden whether or not he denounces Antifa.
Well, first of all, things have changed drastically. That crime bill went and voted. The Black Caucus voted for it. Every black mayor supported it across the board.
Was it a mistake to support it?
Yes, it was. But here's where the mistake came.
Finally, how could the U.S. president's town hall not feature a face-off with the one questioning him? The crackling tension between the NBC anchor and Donald Trump became the highlight of this event. The anchor, Savannah Guthrie, kept interjecting to fact-check Trump's answers and pressed him for more clarifications. Trump oscillated between playing the victim and the aggressor. I'll leave you with this contentious back and forth that is now going viral.
Just this week, you retweeted to your 87 million followers a conspiracy theory that Joe Biden orchestrated to have SEAL Team 6, the Navy SEAL Team 6, killed to cover up the fake death of bin Laden. Now, why would you send a lie like that to your followers? You retweeted
That was a retweet. That was an opinion of somebody, and that was a retweet. I'll put it out there. People can decide for themselves. I don't take a position.
You're not like someone's crazy uncle who can just retweet whatever.
That was a retweet, and I do a lot of retweets. And frankly, because the media is so fake and so corrupt, if I didn't have social media, I don't call it Twitter, I call it social media, I wouldn't be able to get the word out. And the word is false. And you know what
the Fukushima power plant, the site of Japan's worst nuclear accident. It will take 40 years to decommission the entire facility, but Japan is yet to move past the main hurdle, which is disposing the 1.2 million tons of radioactive water at this site. Reports indicate that the government is now considering a controversial dump site, the Pacific Ocean.
2011. Disaster strikes Japan. A nuclear accident at the Fukushima plant, triggered by a massive tsunami and earthquake. It is the most severe nuclear accident since Chernobyl. To stabilize the reactors, authorities used thousands of tons of water. Water that remains at the accident site to this day. These tanks hold close to 1.2 million tons of contaminated water. There are more than 1,000 of these at Fukushima. The water inside has been filtered to reduce radioactivity, but one isotope, tritium, remains. If consumed in large quantities, tritium can be harmful. The major obstacle to dismantling the Fukushima plant is the contaminated water. What do you do with 1.2 million tons of radioactive water? Is there a place vast enough to dump such quantities? The Japanese government certainly thinks so. According to local media, the contaminated water will be dumped into the Pacific Ocean. The government is not giving much away, but reports say an announcement can be expected later this month.
The government has not decided a policy or time frame to make a policy on the issue of the treated water from the Fukushima reactor. On the other hand, it is true that we cannot continue postponing the decision over the handling of the ALPS treated water in order to not delay the decommissioning process of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant.
Earlier this year, a government panel gave two recommendations: releasing the water into sea or evaporating it. Both were described as realistic options. Under the current plan, the contaminated water will be mixed with seawater inside the facility. It will then be released gradually into the ocean, a process that is expected to take around 30 years. There's nothing new about ocean dumping. Even the International Atomic Energy Agency endorses it. Properly filtered water can be released into the ocean after adequate dilution. But when it comes to nuclear contamination, there is always a risk. The fishing community argues that the dumping will affect marine life. They say customers will shun their produce once the water is released. Countries like South Korea have already banned imports from the region. Seoul is staunchly opposed to the discharge of contaminated water. It will be a challenge for Tokyo to get all stakeholders on board, especially under a new Prime Minister. But disposing the contaminated water is a national priority. Every day of inaction is producing 170 tons of wastewater at the facility. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Walking. It's free, it's good for your health, and it keeps the planet clean. But most people today use their car even for short errand runs. And don't blame yourself for it. Blame the cities you live in. Most modern cities have been designed for cars and not human beings. So how exactly do you make a city more walkable? Our next report explains.
If you're in the market for a house, you'll probably have a long list of expectations. Are there schools nearby or hospitals? How close is the supermarket? But more importantly, can you reach these places without pulling your car out? Only a handful of cities provide these services at a walking distance. London, Paris, Bogota, and Hong Kong lead the way. But most cities still prioritize cars over pedestrians. The Institute for Transportation and Development Policy has ranked more than 1,000 cities based on their walkability, a measure of how suitable a city is for walking. We'll show you the results in a bit. But first, why measure walkability at all? For starters, walking doesn't cost you a penny. It's free, it keeps you and the planet healthy, and it strengthens social bonds. The list uses 3 indicators to measure walkability. First, how close you are to car-free areas. Hong Kong tops this list, followed by Moscow, Paris, and Bogota. The second indicator is the proximity to hospitals and schools. In Paris, an impressive 85% of the population fit this category. And third, the size of city blocks. The smaller the blocks, the shorter the distance. Khartoum leads on this indicator. Bogota is the only city that features on all 3 lists. In the 2000s, the city made a concerted effort to focus on public spaces and walking. The campaign seems to have paid off.
The artists hold no punches. They talk about everything from...
Languishing near the bottom of the table are American cities. Here, the sidewalks are in excellent condition, but everything is placed so far apart that walking is practically impossible. Walkable cities don't happen by accident. They are the result of careful planning. The key to achieving walkability is shifting policy focus from cars to pedestrians, to bring essential services closer to residential areas. The coronavirus lockdown has expedited this process. City planners are reimagining streets. In India, authorities have been asked to pedestrianize 3 markets in each city. A couple of them are worth mentioning. Chennai. More than 100 kilometers of pedestrian-friendly streets have been paved here. And Pune, which was lauded in the walkability report for prioritizing pedestrians and cyclists. But India as a whole performs poorly on walkability. Residential areas have expanded kilometers away from the city centre, and most of the roads are yet to get sidewalks. To city planners across the world, the message is simple. Don't build cities for cars. Build them for people. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.